Heather was 26 years old, living in New York and working the night shift as a waitress in a dimly lit bar where the music was always a little too loud and the laughter never seemed meant for her. Every night, she tied her apron, put on a practiced smile, and reminded herself that this life was only temporary. But student loan debt did not feel temporary when it followed her into every quiet moment, and a recent breakup still weighed heavily on her heart. It hadn't ended with shouting or drama, only with a slow, exhausting realization that love had disappeared. By the time Heather stepped behind the bar each evening, her body moved out of habit, but emotionally, she felt drained and fragile. The bar attracted a familiar type of customer. Wealthy men in tailored suits, women who spoke with effortless confidence, conversations filled with business deals, vacations, and opportunities Heather could barely imagine. She served drinks while standing just outside their world, listening without truly belonging. Their lives seemed secure, polished, and protected. Heather didn't envy them as much as she felt invisible beside them, like someone watching life happen through a thick pane of glass, close enough to see it clearly but too far away to touch it. Then Andrew walked in. He didn't make a scene or draw attention to himself. He took a seat at the bar quietly, observing the room with calm certainty. His wealth was obvious, but understated, carried with ease rather than arrogance. What unsettled Heather wasn't his appearance though, but the way his eyes followed her. While others scrolled through their phones or talked among themselves, Andrew watched her move behind the bar, as if he saw past the uniform and the polite smile she offered everyone else. When Heather finally approached him, he met her gaze and said, almost casually, "You look like someone who doesn't belong here." She laughed softly, the automatic response of someone trained to brush off comments that hit too close to home. She made a light remark, asked for his order, and walked away. But his words lingered. They stayed with her between orders and quiet moments, echoing a truth she tried hard to ignore. Deep down, she knew he was right. She didn't belong there, not in a life shaped by exhaustion, debt, and unspoken disappointment. That night, Heather believed Andrew was just another rich man passing briefly through her life, another face she would forget by morning. She had no idea he was about to change everything. Andrew began returning to the bar the very next night. Then the night after that. And the one after that too. He always chose the same seat, always ordered something simple, and never rushed her. At first, Heather assumed he was just another regular who enjoyed the atmosphere, but soon she noticed the pattern. He came during her shift. He waited until she had a free moment. And instead of flirting or showing off, he asked questions and actually listened to her answers. They talked in fragments at first. Short conversations between drink orders and ringing glasses. Andrew asked about her studies, her long hours, the way New York felt when it stopped being exciting and started being heavy. Heather surprised herself by opening up. She didn't talk about her debt in detail or her breakup, but she spoke honestly about being tired, about feeling like she was always running but never arriving. Andrew never interrupted. He never tried to fix her. He just listened, with a quiet focus that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. After a week, Andrew asked her to dinner. The restaurant he chose was elegant and refined, a place Heather had only seen from the outside. Crystal glasses, soft lighting, people who spoke in low, confident tones. She felt out of place the moment she stepped inside, aware of her simple dress and unfamiliar manners. Andrew noticed immediately. He reassured her gently, telling her she looked beautiful and that nothing else mattered. Still, Heather sat stiffly at the table, afraid of saying the wrong thing or reaching for the wrong fork. Halfway through the meal, the truth came out. Andrew mentioned his company casually, as if it were nothing special. The numbers, the influence, the recognition. Heather froze. She realized she wasn't just sitting across from a successful man. He was a billionaire. The word echoed in her mind, heavy and intimidating. Suddenly, everything about the evening felt different. She felt small, exposed, and deeply insecure. She wondered what someone like him could possibly want with someone like her. Andrew noticed the shift immediately. He didn't laugh or brush it off. He didn't reassure her with money or promises. Instead, he slowed the conversation down. He told her he hadn't mentioned it earlier because it usually changed how people saw him. He explained how wealth attracted the wrong kind of attention, the wrong kind of affection. Fake people, he said quietly. Fake love. He admitted that despite everything he had, his life often felt empty, filled with transactions instead of connections. What surprised Heather most was what he didn't do. He didn't rush intimacy. He didn't touch her without permission. He didn't pressure her with charm or power. With Andrew, she felt safe. Emotionally, physically, quietly safe. For the first time in a long time, she felt chosen not for what she could offer, but for who she was when she stopped pretending. When they finally spent the night together, it felt gentle and sincere. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations. Just closeness, warmth, and the belief that something real was growing between them. Lying beside him, Heather allowed herself to hope again. For the first time after her heartbreak, she believed love had finally found her. Everything shattered on an ordinary morning. Heather was half awake, sitting on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hand, scrolling mindlessly while the city outside her window slowly came to life. Then she saw his face. Andrew. Not in a private photo, not across a dinner table, but on national television. He stood confidently in a tailored suit, smiling beside a woman Heather had never seen before. The headline beneath the video froze her breath. Billionaire Andrew Whitmore appears with fiancée Carol Hayes at charity gala. Heather watched the clip again, hoping she had misunderstood. Carol was stunning, polished, elegant, born into a world Heather had only served drinks to. She came from a powerful family, moved with ease among politicians and executives, and looked like she belonged exactly where she stood. Heather felt the room tilt. The man who had listened to her stories, who claimed to hate fake love, was engaged. And she was finding out the same way the rest of the world was. When Heather confronted Andrew, her voice shook despite her effort to stay calm. At first, he was silent. Then he sighed, rubbing his face as if exhausted by a burden too heavy to explain. He admitted it was true. He had been engaged to Carol long before he met Heather. It had been arranged through family expectations and business alliances. I didn't plan this, he said quietly. Meeting you wasn't part of my life plan. His words sounded sincere, almost desperate. He told her the engagement had been loveless, empty, a performance for the public. Heather wanted to believe him, even as her chest ached with betrayal. Then Andrew said the words that planted fragile hope in her heart. He told her he had ended the engagement because of her. That meeting Heather had changed everything. That for the first time, he had chosen his own happiness over appearances. Heather cried that night, torn between pain and relief, between anger and the intoxicating idea that she had been powerful enough to change a billionaire's life. She believed, against her better judgment, that love had won. But the world didn't see a love story. It saw a scandal. Within days, the media exploded. Headlines painted Heather as a manipulative waitress who had seduced a billionaire for money and status. Old photos were dug up. Her social media was dissected. Comment sections filled with cruelty. Gold digger. Home wrecker. Social climber. Strangers decided who she was without ever knowing her name. Heather stopped answering her phone. She stopped leaving her apartment unless necessary. The city that once felt overwhelming now felt openly hostile. The pressure reached her workplace quickly. The bar manager called her into his office, avoiding eye contact. He spoke about bad attention and protecting the business. Heather understood immediately. She was fired politely, but firmly. In one conversation, she lost her job, her income, and the last piece of independence she still held on to. Walking home that night, she realized she had no routine, no safety net, and no way to disappear from the story everyone was telling about her. Andrew stepped in immediately. He offered solutions before she could even ask. He arranged a luxury apartment for her in a quiet building, away from reporters. He hired security. He told her it was for her safety, that the attention would fade if she stayed out of sight. Heather moved in because she had no other option. The apartment was beautiful, spacious, and silent. Too silent. She noticed how everything, from where she lived to how she moved, was now decided for her. At first, Andrew's control felt like care. He reminded her to stay indoors. He suggested what was best for her image. He discouraged her from meeting old friends, saying they might leak information. Slowly, Heather felt her world shrinking. She no longer worked. She no longer chose. She waited. She depended. And each time she tried to express discomfort, Andrew reassured her that it was temporary, that everything he did was out of love. One evening, standing alone in the apartment, Heather looked at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. She had escaped poverty, but lost her voice. She had gained security, but lost freedom. For the first time, she allowed herself to ask the question she had been avoiding since that morning with the TV. Is this love or control? That was when Heather finally understood a truth she would never forget. Love can feel like a cage when it starts deciding your life for you. The phone rang on a quiet afternoon, cutting through the stillness of the apartment Andrew had chosen for Heather. An unfamiliar number lit up the screen. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. Then she answered. The woman on the other end spoke calmly, almost politely. She introduced herself as Carol, Andrew's former fiancée. Carol asked if they could meet, woman to woman. Against every instinct telling her to run, Heather agreed. They met at a quiet cafe far from cameras and crowds. Carol arrived alone, dressed simply, without the glamour Heather had seen on television. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. After a few moments of silence, Carol spoke. She said she wasn't there to insult Heather or compete with her. She was there to explain the truth. Heather listened, gripping her coffee cup as Carol described a world of contracts, expectations, and family control. The engagement, Carol said, had never been about love. It was about power. Then came the sentence that broke everything open. Carol told Heather that Andrew needed a scandal, something public and undeniable, to destroy a business deal between their families. He needed a reason so dramatic that no partnership could survive it. A secret affair with a waitress, followed by public outrage, was the perfect solution. Heather wasn't a mistake. She was a strategy. Carol looked Heather in the eyes and said softly, "You were the excuse he needed." Heather felt numb as she left the cafe. She told herself Carol could be lying. She wanted her to be lying. But doubt had already planted itself too deeply. That evening, when Andrew returned to the apartment, Heather didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply asked him the question she had been carrying since the cafe. Had he used her to break the business deal? Had she been part of his plan from the beginning? Andrew didn't deny it. He didn't explain it. He didn't defend himself. He just stood there, silent. His eyes were heavy, but his mouth stayed closed. In that moment, Heather understood something painful and final. Silence wasn't confusion. Silence was confirmation. Every word he had once spoken now felt hollow. Every promise collapsed under the weight of what he refused to say. Heather walked into the bedroom and packed a small bag. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Andrew watched her, still silent, as if words no longer mattered. When she reached the door, she paused for just a second. She realized he wasn't stopping her, not because he couldn't, but because he knew he had already lost her. She stepped out into the hallway, carrying nothing but heartbreak and clarity. The elevator doors closed, and with them, the version of her life she had believed in. As the building disappeared behind her, Heather finally understood the deepest betrayal of all. He didn't lie with words. He lied with silence. Weeks passed, and Heather slowly returned to a life that felt familiar, quiet, and real. She moved back into her small apartment and found a job at a modest neighborhood cafe. The pay was not great, but the work was honest. Every morning, she made coffee, smiled at strangers, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, grounded. No cameras. No headlines. No secrets. Just simple days that belonged to her. One morning, a letter arrived with her name written carefully on the envelope. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Andrew. Her hands trembled as she opened it. In the letter, he didn't make excuses. He admitted the truth. At the beginning, he had used the scandal to escape the business deal and the control of Carol's family. Heather had been part of that plan. But then, he wrote, something changed. He fell in love with her for real. When the board of his company forced him to choose, his position or her, he chose Heather. He lost his company. He lost his power. He lost everything he once thought defined him. Heather cried as she finished reading, not because she wanted him back, but because the truth had finally arrived, too late. She agreed to meet him one last time. They sat across from each other on a park bench. Andrew wore simple clothes. There was no confidence, no luxury, no distance left. He didn't ask her to return. He only thanked her for coming. Heather looked at him calmly and spoke with clarity she had earned through pain. She told him that love without honesty destroys everything. That love cannot grow where manipulation lives. Money, power, and sacrifice mean nothing if the foundation is broken. She told him she was choosing herself, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. She stood up, wished him peace, and walked away. This time, she didn't look back. Heather understood now, love is not money. Love is not control. Love is honesty, even when it hurts. If you believe love must come with respect, gently tap like. Share in the comments the lesson this story gave you. And subscribe to keep learning English through real-life stories that speak to the heart.